High above the frigid waters of the Baltic Sea, a lone U.S. Navy MH-60R Seahawk helicopter carved through the low clouds, its rotors slicing the damp air with mechanical precision. The crew was calm but alert, routine patrol, they were told. Yet every pilot in that cabin knew there was no such thing as routine anymore. Tensions were rising, and the thin blue line of the sky had become the newest front in a quiet but dangerous standoff. The radar operator leaned forward. Contact! Fast mover, bearing 095, closing distance, looks Russian. The pilot's eyes narrowed behind his visor. Copy that. Let's see what they're up to. Moments later, a gray silhouette emerged through the haze, an armed Russian Ka-27 helicopter, flying low, aggressive, and far too close for comfort. It wasn't a random encounter. The Russians had been testing American responses for weeks, pushing boundaries, seeing how far they could go before the U.S. reacted. But this time, they had gone too far. The Russian pilot angled his craft toward the Seahawk, crossing dangerously near. Through the cockpit glass, the American crew could almost see the defiant smirk of the opposing pilot. It was a move meant to provoke, to intimidate. The American commander, however, had a different plan. "Maintain position," he ordered, his voice steady. "No sudden moves. Let them show their hand first." The two aircraft circled each other like predators sizing up prey. The Russian chopper banked left sharply, cutting across the Seahawk's nose. Warning lights flickered inside the American cockpit as turbulence rocked the craft. "Sir, that was close," the co-pilot muttered. "Closer than they should have dared," came the reply. The American pilot toggled the radio to an open frequency. "Unidentified Russian aircraft, you are entering restricted airspace. Alter course immediately." Static. Then a mocking Russian voice crackled back, calm, deliberate. "You are far from home, American. Maybe you should turn around." The tension inside the Seahawk was palpable. The radar operator's hand hovered near the countermeasure controls. But the pilot stayed composed. "Negative. We're exactly where we need to be." Then, without warning, the Russian helicopter dropped altitude and sped forward, buzzing within 100 feet of the Seahawk's tail rotor. That was it. A move that reckless could cause a collision. The American pilot pulled up, steadied the chopper, and called command. Hostile maneuver confirmed. Permission to engage deterrent protocols. The order came swiftly, authorized. The Seahawk swung around with controlled fury. The pilot executed a precision defensive maneuver, positioning directly above the Russian helicopter's rotor wash. It wasn't an attack, it was a message. The turbulence from the Seahawk's downwash hammered the Ka-27, rattling it violently. For the first time, the Russian pilot backed off, forced to retreat or risk losing control. The tables had turned. The Americans didn't need to fire a shot. They had won the encounter through skill, discipline, and sheer nerve. But the story didn't end there. As the Russian chopper retreated toward its fleet, new blips appeared on the Seahawk's radar. Multiple signatures, fast-moving, inbound from the east. The crew exchanged tense glances. Whatever had just happened had triggered a response, and now the U.S. helicopter was far from alone. The pilot exhaled slowly, scanning the horizon. "Looks like they didn't take the message well." The co-pilot adjusted his headset, voice steady despite the rising tension. "Then we send another one." Below them, waves churned under the rotor's fury.
The cabin went silent.
Above them, the cold gray
Every man in the
sky began
Seahawk
to
knew
fill
what those
with
words
movement,
meant. Something
an
had
uneasy
changed.
dance of machines
The pilot
and
steadied his
nations,
breath and
where
replied,
a single wrong
"Copy,
decision
command.
could ignite
Standing by
something
for
far
instructions."
greater.
There was
And
a
as
pause,
the Seahawk
just long
repositioned
enough
to
for the
face
hum
the
of the
approaching
engines to fill the
contacts,
tension.
the radio crackled
Then
again.
the voice from command
This time,
returned,
not
low
in Russian,
and urgent.
but from command back
Intel
home.
confirms multiple
The message
Russian
was
aircraft
short,
approaching
sharp,
from Kaliningrad
and heavy
sector.
with implication.
Orders are to maintain position,
New orders
collect
just
data,
came through.
and avoid engagement
"You're
less
not
directly
going
threatened."
to like this.
Understood,
The
the
cabin
pilot
went
said.
silent.
He looked to his
Every
crew,
man
reading
in
their
the
faces.
Seahawk knew what those words
They all knew
meant.
how quickly avoid
Something had
engagement could
changed.
turn into defend
The
at all
pilot
costs.
steadied his breath
The
and
radar
replied,
operator spoke first.
"Copy, command."
Contacts confirmed
Standing by
3 fast
for
movers,
instructions.
likely Su-30s.
There
They're
was a
closing in
pause,
fast.
just long enough
Sir,
for the
the
hum
Seahawk
of the
sensors
engines to
pinged
fill
again
the
and
tension.
again, the beeps
Then,
rising in
the
tempo.
voice from command returned.
The horizon
low and
darkened
urgent.
as the first Russian jets
Intel
broke through the
confirms
clouds,
multiple
slicing
Russian
through the sky with
aircraft
menacing
approaching
precision.
from Kaliningrad
Their
sector.
engines thundered like
Orders
distant
are to
storms,
maintain
the
position,
sound vibrating
collect
through the
data,
helicopter's
and
frame.
avoid engagement.
They're not here
unless
for show,
directly
the
threatened.
co-pilot muttered.
Understood.
No, the pilot replied
said.
quietly.
He
They're
looked
here to send a
his
message.
crew,
The
reading
jets spread
their
out,
faces.
forming a wide arc
They
around the
all
Seahawk.
knew how quickly
One
avoid
swooped low,
engagement
passing
could
within
turn
meters
into
of the
defend
helicopter's
at
path.
all costs.
The shockwave from its wake
The
jolted
radar
the Seahawk
operator
violently,
spoke first.
instruments flickering.
Contacts confirmed.
Command, we are
3
being
fast
shadowed by
movers,
multiple
likely
hostiles, the pilot
Su-30s.
reported. They're
They're
flying dangerously
closing in
close.
fast, sir.
Command's voice
The
came
Seahawk
back,
sensors
calm but
pinged
clipped.
again and again.
Hold your course, Eagle
the
9.
beeps rising in tempo.
Reinforcements are en route,
Outside,
but reinforcements
the
were
horizon
minutes
darkened
away.
as the
Out
first
here in the
Russian
open
jets
expanse of the
broke through
Baltic,
the clouds,
minutes could feel like
slicing
hours.
through the sky with
The
menacing
Russian-led
precision.
jet tilted its
Their
wings a
engines
gesture,
thundered like distant
almost
storms,
mocking before pulling
the
up
sound
and circling
vibrating
back.
through the helicopter's
A second
frame.
later, the
They're
Seahawk's
not here
radar
for
lit up
show,
with a lock
the
warning.
co-pilot muttered.
The pilot's
No,
heart pounded.
the pilot replied
They're painting
quietly.
us with targeting
They're here
radar.
to send a message.
The radar operator barked.
The jets spread out,
Countermeasures
forming
armed,
a wide
said the
arc
co-pilot,
around the
standing
Seahawk.
by.
One
Hold
swooped
fire, the
low,
pilot ordered firmly.
passing within meters
We
of
won't
the
be the ones to
helicopter's
start this.
path. The
The
shockwave
Seahawk
from
stayed its
wake
course,
jolted the
steady in
Seahawk
defiance.
violently.
The Russian
Instruments
jets loomed
flickering.
close,
Command,
testing limits,
we are
daring
being
the Americans
shadowed
to
by
react.
multiple hostiles.
Then,
the pilot
one of the
reported.
Su-30s broke
They're
formation
flying
and dove beneath
dangerously
the
close.
helicopter's flight path,
Command's
popping
voice
up
came
just
back,
ahead.
calm but
It was
clipped.
a taunt,
Hold
a
your
dangerous
course,
one.
Eagle 9.
Suddenly, the
Reinforcements
Seahawk's radar
are
screens
en
flashed
route.
read a second lock warning,
But reinforcements
then a third.
were minutes away.
They've got multiple
Out
locks
here,
on us.
in the open
Evasive
expanse of the
maneuvers.
Baltic,
Now,
minutes could feel like
the Seahawk
hours.
banked hard
The
left,
Russian lead
diving
jet
low
tilted
over the
its
icy
wings,
water.
a gesture
The rotor tips
almost
nearly
mocking,
slicing the sea spray.
before pulling up and
The Russian
circling
jets
back.
followed, streaking
A second
above,
later,
their
the
engines
Seahawk's
roaring like
radar
thunder.
lit up with a
The
lock
helicopter's
warning.
defensive flares
The
burst to
pilot's heart
life,
pounded.
scattering bright
They're
magnesium
painting
trails
us with
across the
targeting
sky.
radar.
Command,
The radar
this is Eagle
operator
9.
barked.
We are under active threat.
Countermeasures armed,
Request immediate
said
air
the
support.
co-pilot.
Copy,
Standing
Eagle 9,
by.
came the voice
Hold
from command.
fire. the
F-18s
pilot
are wheels
ordered
up from the
firmly.
carrier Roosevelt.
We won't be the ones
8 of 5
to start
minutes.
this.
5
The
minutes might be
Seahawk
too long,
stayed its course,
the pilot muttered,
steady in
gripping
defiance.
the controls tighter.
The Russian jets
As the
loomed
Seahawk
close,
leveled out,
testing
a shadow
limits,
flashed across
daring
its
the
cockpit.
Americans
The
to
lead
react.
Russian jet had rolled
Then,
directly
one
overhead.
of the Su-30s
Its
broke
belly-mounted
formation
weapons
and
racks
dove
visible
beneath
through
the
the glass.
helicopter's flight path.
For a moment, it
popping
felt
up
like the
just
entire
ahead.
world had
It
narrowed
was a
to the
taunt,
space between
a
those two
dangerous
aircraft.
one. Suddenly,
The pilot made
the
a split-second
Seahawk's radar
decision.
screens flashed red.
He flipped to the open
a second
frequency
lock
again.
warning, then
His
a
voice
third.
sharp and controlled.
They've got multiple
Russian
locks
aircraft,
on us.
disengage immediately.
Evasive
We're violating
maneuvers.
international
Now.
airspace. Silence.
The Seahawk banked hard
Then,
left,
a cold,
diving
accented
low over
voice
the icy
replied,
water. The
"You are
rotor
guests
tips
here,
nearly
American.
slicing the sea spray.
Maybe you should go
The
before we
Russian
make you."
jets followed.
The Seahawk's
streaking
pilot
above,
didn't flinch.
Their
We'll have
engines
to try.
roaring like thunder.
At that exact
the
moment,
helicopter's
the clouds
defensive
above them
flares
split
burst
apart.
to life.
2
scattering
U.S.
bright
Navy
magnesium
F-18
trails
Super Hornets
across the
roared
sky.
into the scene,
Command,
streaking low
this
and
is
fast,
Eagle 9.
contrails
We
trailing
are
like
under
white
active
scars across
threat.
the sky.
Request
The radio
immediate
erupted
air
with a new
support.
voice.
Copy.
Confident and
Eagle
commanding.
9. Came the voice
This
from
is Falcon
command.
Lead. We've got your back.
F-18s are wheels up
Eagle
from
9.
the carrier
Let's even
Roosevelt.
the odds.
ETA.
Relief
5
flashed across the
minutes.
Seahawk crew's faces,
5 minutes
but it was
might be
short-lived.
too long.
The Russian
pilot
jets didn't
muttered,
retreat.
gripping the
Instead,
controls tighter.
they spread out into
As
a combat
the Seahawk
formation.
leveled out, a
The
shadow
Baltic sky
flashed
was now a
across its
chessboard of
cockpit.
steel and
The lead
firepower.
Russian jet had
2
rolled
nations
directly
staring each
overhead,
other down,
its
neither willing to
belly-mounted
blink.
weapons racks visible
Falcon
through the
lead to
glass.
Russian formation.
For a moment,
The F-18
it felt
pilot
like
called,
the entire world
"Disengage
had narrowed
immediately
to the
or you will
space
be
between
intercepted."
those two aircraft.
The response came not in
The
words
pilot
but in
made a
motion.
split-second decision.
The lead Russian
He
jet
flipped
flared
to
its
the open
afterburners
frequency again,
and dove toward
his voice
the American
sharp
fighters,
and controlled.
slicing through the air
Russian
with lethal
aircraft.
intent.
Disengage
The
immediately.
first missile lock alarm
You
screamed
are
inside the
violating
Seahawk's cabin.
international
The standoff
airspace.
had just turned into something far
Silence.
more dangerous.
Then
And as the
cold,
F-18s
accented
accelerated
voice
to
replied,
intercept,
"You are
the
guests
Seahawk
here,
crew braced for
American.
what they all knew
Maybe
could be the
you should
spark that
go
lit a
before
fire the
we
world
make
was on
you."
ready
The
for.
Seahawks pilot didn't flinch. "You'll have to try." At that exact moment, the clouds above them split apart. 2 U.S. Navy F-18 Super Hornets roared into the scene, streaking low and fast, contrails trailing like white scars across the sky. The radio erupted with a new voice, confident and commanding. "This is Falcon Lead. We've got your back, Eagle 9. Let's even the odds. Relief flashed across the Seahawk crew's faces, but it was short-lived. The Russian jets didn't retreat. Instead, they spread out into a combat formation. The Baltic sky was now a chessboard of steel and firepower, two nations staring each other down, neither willing to blink. Falcon lead to Russian formation, the F-18 pilot called. Disengage immediately or you will be intercepted. The response came not in words but in motion. The lead Russian jet flared its afterburners and dove toward the American fighters, slicing through the air with lethal intent. The first missile lock alarm screamed inside the Seahawk's cabin. The standoff had just turned into something far more dangerous. And as the F-18s accelerated to intercept, the Seahawk crew braced for what they all knew could be the spark that lit a fire the world wasn't ready for. The roar of the F-18s filled the air, shaking the Seahawks' frame as they streaked ahead. The Russian Su-30s split formation, two banking wide while the lead fighter dove low, trying to bait the Americans into pursuit. The calm of the sea below was gone, replaced by the chaos of engines, radar pings, and the electric tension of two superpowers a heartbeat away from combat. Falcon lead to command, the F-18 pilot called. We've got 3 Russian bandits, weapons hot, attempting to de-escalate. Negative engagement, command replied. Keep defensive posture only. Do not fire unless fired upon. But in the sky, theory meant little. The Russian lead jet climbed sharply, looping overhead before diving straight toward the Seahawk again. Its proximity warning screamed through the cabin. "He's coming in low," shouted the radar operator. The Seahawk pilot jerked the stick right, pulling into a hard bank just as the Russian fighter streaked past, so close the turbulence rocked the chopper sideways. The co-pilot's hand gripped the dash to steady himself. "That was deliberate," he hissed. "They're playing chicken." "Yeah," the pilot muttered. "And one of us is going to blink or burn." Above, the F-18s rolled into a defensive intercept pattern. One of them matched the Russian lead's altitude, engines screaming, the two jets slicing past each other in a blur of motion and force. The radio crackled. "Falcon 2 to lead, we're locked. They've gone hot." Before the words had finished echoing, a missile lock alarm tore through the comms, a shrill, unmistakable sound that made every heartbeat stop for a second. Missile launch! Missile launch! A white trail cut across the sky, tearing through the clouds like lightning. The Russian fighter had fired a short-range heat-seeking missile, not at the F-18s, but at the Seahawk. Evasive! Evasive! The Seahawk's pilot pulled the helicopter into a hard dive, the ocean spinning wildly outside the cockpit. "Deploy flares." A burst of glowing magnesium erupted behind the helicopter, streaking in bright arcs. The missile veered, confused by the sudden heat signatures, and detonated prematurely, sending a shockwave that buffeted the Seahawk but didn't destroy it. "Command, this is Eagle 9. We've been fired upon. Confirm hostile engagement." Static, then command's voice, tighter now. "Confirmed. All units are cleared to engage." Repeat, cleared to engage. The restraint was over. "Falcon lead, weapons free," came the call. "Take them down." The first F-18 peeled away and locked onto the Russian lead jet. A Sidewinder missile roared from under its wing, streaking toward its target with lethal precision. The Russian pilot tried to dive, cutting across the sky, but it was too late. The explosion lit the clouds like a flash of dawn. "Splash 1," Falcon lead reported, his voice cold and flat. The other 2 Russian jets broke hard left, fleeing east toward Kaliningrad airspace, afterburners blazing. But the Americans didn't chase. They knew how close they were to igniting something that couldn't be undone. Inside the Seahawk, the air was heavy, relief mixed with the shock of survival. The pilot steadied the craft, watching smoke drift across the horizon where the enemy jet had gone down. The radio buzzed again. "Eagle 9, this is command. Maintain current heading. Recovery team inbound. We need full telemetry from your systems ASAP. Acknowledged, the pilot replied. His voice was calm, but his hands were trembling on the controls. Sir, the co-pilot said quietly, you think Moscow will call this a mistake? The pilot didn't answer right away. He looked out over the gray expanse of water, where the sun was just beginning to break through the clouds, and finally said, No, they'll call it a test. And we just passed. But before the crew could exhale, the radar operator's tone turned sharp again. Sir, I'm getting something new. Bigger. Multiple contacts inbound. Looks like bombers. And they're not alone. The pilot turned his eyes to the horizon, where the faint silhouettes of large aircraft were emerging through the mist, flanked by fighter escorts. Command, he said into the mic, voice steady but low. We might have just stepped into the next phase. And then, faintly in the distance, another voice cut through the static, one they didn't expect to hear. This is Admiral West aboard the USS Roosevelt. All aircraft, prepare for escalation protocols. We're moving to intercept. This isn't over. The Seahawk crew exchanged silent looks. The sky ahead was filling again. More Russian aircraft, more American fighters, the beginnings of a confrontation that could spiral beyond anyone's control. The pilot tightened his grip on the controls and muttered, almost to himself, It never ends, does it? Outside, the first bombers broke formation, and the sky above the Baltic began to boil with movement, the prelude to something far larger than any of them had imagined. The low growl of engines filled the sky, spreading like thunder over the steel-gray sea. The U.S. Seahawk hovered in tense silence, its crew staring at the radar screen as more blips appeared. Larger, slower, deliberate. Russian Tu-95 bombers, unmistakable even on radar. Their signatures were massive, their escort fighters surrounding them like wolves guarding a pack. Command, we've got visual on 4 bombers, 6 escorts, the Seahawk pilot reported, eyes fixed on the horizon. Range, 20 miles and closing. Copy that, Eagle 9, came the calm but firm voice of Admiral West from the USS Roosevelt. Falcon Squadron, you are cleared to intercept. Maintain formation and shadow the bombers. Do not engage unless they cross the line. The line. Everyone knew what it meant. A few invisible coordinates dividing international airspace from restricted NATO territory. Cross it, and the entire situation could erupt. The Seahawks crew watched as the first wave of F-18s streaked overhead, the sound tearing through the air like a whip crack. Moments later, contrails from Russian fighters twisted through the clouds to meet them. The pilot adjusted the Seahawks' position. Let's keep a visual from below. Stay clear of the intercept zone. Below, the ocean rolled cold and restless, but above, it was a storm of movement. The two forces circled each other, not firing, but ready. The air was thick with restraint and menace. Falcon lead to Russian formation, came a sharp voice over the open channel. You are approaching restricted airspace. Alter course immediately. The reply came seconds later, heavy with arrogance. We are in international skies. You do not own the air. The Russian bombers held their path, unflinching. They were headed straight for the invisible border. It wasn't just a provocation, it was a message. Admiral West's voice cut through the comms again, steel beneath his calm tone. Falcons, form a wall. Do not let them through. The American jets shifted formation, positioning themselves directly in the bomber's path. The Seahawks crew could see it all now, a ballet of steel and precision unfolding across the clouds. The Russian lead fighter tilted its wings, a signal. The bombers began to descend slightly, adjusting altitude, creeping closer toward restricted airspace. They're not turning, the Seahawks co-pilot muttered. They're going to test us again. The radar operator's voice was tense. Sir, One of the escorts just lit us up. They're scanning the Seahawk. The pilot's jaw tightened. Let them look. We're not backing off. Then, without warning, one of the Russian bombers broke formation, its nose dipping toward the line. The lead F-18 moved to block it, wings glinting in the morning light. The two aircraft passed so close that their jet wash rippled across the sea below. A tense second. Then another. Still no retreat. Admiral West's voice returned, harder now. Falcon lead. Repeat warning. If they cross, you are cleared to act. The radio clicked. Copy, sir. One more chance. Falcon lead switched frequencies. Russian flight, you are in violation of NATO airspace. Turn around immediately. Silence. Then a voice, dry, confident, unshaken. We do not fear empty threats. The Russian bomber crossed the line. Falcon lead, weapons hot. A flash erupted as an American missile streaked upward, carving a line of fire through the clouds. The Seahawk crew flinched as the explosion bloomed, a massive ball of flame tearing one of the bombers apart in midair. The calm, cold sea suddenly reflected an inferno. Target destroyed, Falcon lead confirmed, his voice steady but grim. The remaining Russian aircraft scattered, fighters diving, bombers veering off in every direction. The radio came alive with overlapping voices, warnings, commands, screams of jet engines pushing to their limits. Falcon 2, brake right. You've got one on your 6. Fox 2. Fox 2. Missile away. Command, we are under full engagement. Repeat, full engagement. The sky became chaos. Contrails tangled across the horizon as missiles cut through clouds like streaks of lightning. Explosions lit the heavens, sending shockwaves that rippled through the Seahawk's cockpit. The pilot held steady, trying to keep the helicopter low but close enough to relay visual data back to the fleet. Command, this is Eagle 9. We're witnessing active combat engagement. Multiple hostiles down, 2 F-18s hit. The Admiral's voice was sharp now. Eagle 9, pull back immediately. Repeat, disengage and return to carrier coordinates. But the Seahawk couldn't move just yet. One of the F-18s, hit by debris, had lost control, its smoke trail spiraling toward the sea. We've got a bird going down, the co-pilot shouted. The Seahawk's pilot didn't hesitate. We're going after him. Sir, that's suicide. I said we're going. He pulled the stick forward, diving toward the crash zone as flames and debris rained around them. The cold wind screamed through the cockpit as they dropped toward the waves. Below, a faint parachute bloomed, a pilot ejecting just in time. There. I see him. 200 meters off the port side. The Seahawk descended fast, rotors whipping the water into chaos. The rescue diver was already unstrapping, gear ready. Hold her steady, the pilot shouted as they hovered low. The diver leaped, cutting cleanly into the waves. Moments later, he resurfaced with the downed pilot in tow, signaling for pickup. The Seahawk's winch roared as it reeled them in, just as another Russian fighter screamed overhead, its shadow flashing across the sea. Command, we have the pilot. Preparing to exfil. But before they could climb out, the radar operator's voice broke through, filled with dread. Sir, new contacts. Big ones. Multiple launches detected from the Russian coast, inbound. Missiles. Long-range anti-ship missiles, hundreds of miles away but closing fast. The Roosevelt and the entire U.S. fleet were now in their path. The pilot's voice dropped to a whisper. They've just escalated to the next level. Command, this is Eagle 9, he said over the radio, his tone cold and resolute. They've fired. The war's already begun. Far across the horizon, faint trails of smoke rose against the dimming sky, each one carrying the weight of a decision no one could take back. And as the Seahawk climbed through the wind, the Admiral's voice came through one last time. Quiet, but with an edge that cut through the static. All units, prepare for counterstrike. The sea below burned with reflected firelight as the American fleet turned to face the storm. A wall of sound rolled over the sea as alarms began to blare across every deck of the USS Roosevelt. The flight deck crew scrambled into motion, their boots pounding against steel, the smell of jet fuel and salt air thick in the chaos. Overhead, the sky that had been gray only minutes ago now flashed with distant explosions. The calm before had shattered. The world was tipping toward war. "Missile impact in 6 minutes," shouted a voice over the comms. Multiple inbound trajectories from the Russian coast, Mach 2 and climbing. Admiral West stood in the command tower, one hand gripping the rail, the other pressed to his headset. His eyes were locked on the horizon where faint, glowing trails streaked low across the clouds. "Activate Aegis Defense Grid. Get the Burke and Hopper in formation. I want interceptors in the air now." "Aye, sir," came the response. Out on the water, 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers flanked the carrier, their vertical launch systems coming alive. A moment later, streaks of light erupted skyward, SM-6 interceptors, arcing into the darkening sky to meet the threat. Inside the Seahawk, the pilot steadied his hands on the controls, the rescued F-18 pilot barely conscious in the back, wrapped in a silver thermal blanket. The diver sat beside him, dripping wet but silent. "Eagle 9 to command," the pilot radioed. "We're clear of the crash zone and heading back to the carrier. We've got your man." "Understood, Eagle 9, Admiral West's voice came back. "Make it fast. Things are about to get ugly." "Copy that." The Seahawk banked hard, engines whining as it turned toward the fleet. Below, the dark waves rippled with light from dozens of missile trails, a deadly constellation reflected on the sea's surface. Then came the first impact. A thunderclap split the air as one of the Russian cruise missiles slammed into the ocean near the destroyer Hopper, throwing up a column of water that rose higher than the ship itself. The shockwaves slammed into the Seahawk, rattling the frame. "Jesus, that was close!" the co-pilot yelled, gripping the console. "Keep it steady," the pilot barked. "She can handle it." Another missile tore across the horizon, intercepted this time by an American SM-6. The explosion painted the clouds in orange fire. "Direct hit!" came a shout through the fleet's comms. "One missile down. Multiple still inbound." The Roosevelt's deck was alive with motion now, F-18s roaring into the sky 2 at a time, their afterburners cutting through the smoke. Above the fleet, a swarm of aircraft began forming into combat groups, heading east toward the source of the launches. "Strike packages are airborne," an officer reported to Admiral West. "ETA to target zone, 10 minutes. "Good," West replied. "Let's give them something to think about." But the Russians weren't finished. The radar tech turned, pale-faced. "Admiral, new wave of launches detected. 20. No, 30 missiles. It's a full strike." West's jaw clenched. "Then we hold the line." Back in the Seahawk, the radar operator's voice trembled. "Sir, new signatures closing from the north. They're fast, fighters. Looks like a Russian response wing." "How many?" "Too many." The Seahawk's pilot glanced out the window. Faint dots appeared against the clouds, moving in perfect formation. The air was thick with distant thunder. "Command, this is Eagle 9. Be advised, Russian fighters inbound on intercept vector. We won't make it to the carrier if they get to us first." There was silence for a moment, then Admiral West's voice came through, calm, unshaken. "Understood, Eagle 9. You'll have company. Falcon Wing, escort that bird home." From the distance came the roar of engines, 4 F-18s slicing low over the sea, afterburners blazing. They closed in fast, taking formation around the Seahawk. "Falcon Wing to Eagle 9, one of the pilots said over the open frequency, voice sharp and steady. "We've got you covered. Stay low and fast." "Copy that, Falcon." The Seahawk dropped altitude, skimming just above the water's surface, rotor blades slicing through the salt spray. The Russian fighters were closing fast, radar locks flashing across the screen. "Falcon 2, brake right," someone shouted. "They've got tone on you." A missile streaked past, missing by meters. Another exploded behind them, shaking the helicopter violently. "Evasive maneuvers," the Seahawk pilot shouted, yanking the controls. The helicopter dipped hard, nearly touching the waves. One of the F-18s banked around, loosing a missile of its own. A flash lit the sky. One Russian jet spiraled into the sea, a streak of flame marking its fall. Splash, one bandit. But there were more coming. Dozens. From the Roosevelt, new F-35s screamed into the air, their sleek forms cutting through the haze like blades. They joined the fight in seconds, unleashing bursts of cannon fire that echoed over the water. The Seahawk's co-pilot turned to the pilot, eyes wide. "Sir, look at that." Ahead, the horizon glowed with fire. The hopper had taken a direct hit. Flames towered above the destroyer's deck as its crew fought desperately to contain the damage. "Command, this is Eagle 9, the pilot said, voice heavy. "The hopper's been struck. She's burning bad." Admiral West's voice came through, low but fierce. "All units, initiate recovery protocols. We can't lose another ship." "Sir," the radar operator said, his voice breaking slightly. Another wave of Russian bombers just took off from the mainland. "They're coming straight for us." West didn't hesitate. "Launch the strike group. Full authorization. It's time to hit back." Over the Baltic, the night came alive. American jets streaked east, guided by the glow of radar locks and the distant shimmer of enemy afterburners. The sea below churned with fire and debris, and the world held its breath as two superpowers danced on the edge of catastrophe. Inside the Seahawk, the pilot finally spotted the Roosevelt through the haze, still intact, her deck swarming with aircraft. He gritted his teeth, pushing the helicopter harder. "Almost home," he muttered. "Almost." The radar operator's voice cut through like a knife. "Incoming missile. Bearing 180. The pilot jerked his head up, a faint white streak arced toward them from the sky. There was no time to think. "Brace!" he shouted. The missile closed the distance in seconds, and the world exploded in white. The explosion slammed into the Seahawk like a hammer. The helicopter jolted sideways, alarms shrieking as metal tore and fire burst across the side panels. The co-pilot screamed something that was lost in the roar. The windshield cracked, the cabin filled with smoke, and the world outside spun in violent circles of sea and sky. "Mayday! Mayday! Eagle 9 going down!" the pilot shouted into the radio, his voice shaking but controlled. "We've been hit, losing hydraulics, trying to keep her steady." The helicopter shuddered, half its tail missing, one rotor blade bent and shrieking. Below, the sea rose fast. The pilot fought the controls, forcing the Seahawk into a hard, angled descent to keep from rolling. "Everyone brace." The impact was brutal. The Seahawk slammed into the waves, broke apart, and plunged nose first into the freezing water. For a moment there was nothing but silence and bubbles, then movement. The pilot's head was ringing, vision blurred. Cold salt water poured into the cockpit. He tore off his harness, gasping for air as he pulled the unconscious co-pilot free. The rescue diver, already half submerged, fought to open the side hatch. Together they dragged the injured F-18 pilot and themselves out through the jagged opening. They surfaced into chaos, burning debris floating around them, oil slicks igniting in patches of orange flame. The night sky above was alive with streaks of light and thunder. Jets tangled in dogfights high overhead, the distant fleet's missiles rising like pillars of fire. "Command, this is Eagle 9, the pilot shouted into his waterproof radio. "We're down. Coordinates transmitting. 3 souls alive, 1 injured." Static. Then a faint reply. "Copy. Eagle 9, rescue underway. Hold position." The signal cut out in a burst of static. The rescue diver pointed north. Through the haze, the faint silhouette of a destroyer moved toward them, its deck guns firing into the night. But between them and that ship, fast shadows were moving low across the water. Boats. Small, fast, unmarked. "Sir," the diver said, voice trembling, "those aren't ours." The pilot squinted. The shapes were closing. Black inflatables with mounted weapons, their engines low and deliberate. Russian special forces, or something close to it. He looked down at the injured F-18 pilot floating beside him. They couldn't outswim speedboats, and they couldn't call for help again if the comms were jammed. "We need to move," he said. "Now." They began to swim, dragging the unconscious man with them, each stroke heavy with exhaustion. The diver glanced back. The boats were closer now, flashes of muzzle fire lighting the waves. Bullets slapped the water, sending up sharp bursts of spray. Then, from somewhere above, a new sound, the thunder of turbines. A U.S. Navy V-22 Osprey broke through the clouds, banking low, its rotors tilting as it descended. Its searchlights cut wide beams through the smoke and mist. The pilot waved frantically, holding up a flare from his vest. "Over here. We've got wounded." The Osprey dropped lower, its rear ramp opening mid-air. A gunner leaned out with an M240, firing short bursts toward the approaching boats. The sea erupted in flashes as the enemy craft veered off, smoke trailing behind one that caught fire. A line dropped from the Osprey's side. The diver clipped the F-18 pilot to it, and together they were hauled upward through the spray. The Seahawk pilot went last, his arms burning as he climbed into the hold. The moment his boots hit the deck, medics rushed in, securing the wounded and cutting away wet flight suits. The Osprey lifted sharply, banking west toward the carrier group. Through the open ramp, the pilot could see the sea below, burning in patches, the wreckage of ships and aircraft scattered across miles of water. The comms officer handed him a headset. "Sir, Admiral West wants a situation report." The pilot pressed it to his ear. His voice was raw. "Eagle 9 recovered. 2 wounded. Enemy fast boats engaged. Areas crawling with hostiles." The Admiral's reply came over the roar of engines. "Understood. We're taking heavy fire, but the strike group is on the move. You did your job, son. Now get ready. We're about to hit back." Outside, the horizon flared again as dozens of Tomahawk missiles launched from the U.S. ships, their trails cutting bright lines toward the distant Russian coast. The pilot stared at them in silence. The sky was burning, the sea below seething with flame. The world had changed in the span of an hour, and now there was no pulling it back. The Osprey shook as it climbed higher, and the radio crackled again. "Eagle 9, brace yourselves. We're picking up new contacts, large formation inbound from the east. Looks like they're sending everything they've got." The pilot tightened his harness, looking out into the storm of light and fire ahead. The first sparks of dawn were breaking over the sea, painting the clouds red. He muttered to himself, almost too low to hear, "Then so are we." The engines roared, the Osprey banking toward the battlefront, carrying them straight into the heart of the next wave. The Osprey's engine screamed as it pushed against the wind, banking hard toward the thickest plume of smoke rising from the battle below. The pilot of Eagle 9, still soaked and bruised from the crash, braced himself against the vibration running through the fuselage. Medics worked frantically over the wounded F-18 pilot at the back. The smell of fuel, salt, and burned metal filled the cabin. A crew chief leaned in from the cockpit. "Sir, the Admiral wants you topside as soon as we dock. Roosevelt's taken minor hits, but she's still fighting." The Seahawk pilot nodded. "How's the line holding?" "Barely," the crew chief said. "The Russians threw half their Black Sea wing at us. We've got reinforcements coming up from the North Sea, but until they get here—" He didn't finish the sentence. Through the side window, the sea was a battlefield. The hopper was burning but afloat. Rescue choppers hovered over the deck, winches lowering into the smoke. Tracer fire streaked the air as F-35s tore across the horizon in pursuit of the retreating Russian fighters. Every few seconds, the sky lit up with another interception, white flashes followed by thunder rolling across the waves. "Contact, port side!" someone yelled. The Osprey banked sharply. Below, 3 fast-moving silhouettes skimmed the surface, Russian corvettes firing bursts of anti-aircraft tracer rounds. Orange arcs zipped past the aircraft, close enough that the hull rang like a drum. "Hold her steady!" the pilot shouted. The Osprey's side guns opened up, answering with a long, rattling roar. One of the Russian ships erupted in sparks, another veered off trailing smoke. "Direct hit!" the gunner yelled. The Osprey cleared the engagement zone and angled toward the carrier. The deck of the Roosevelt came into view, crowded with aircraft, mechanics, and armed sailors. Alarms wailed, damage control teams sprinted between fires, dousing them with foam. The carrier's island tower was blackened from a near miss. As soon as the Osprey touched down, the Seahawk pilot unstrapped and stumbled out into the chaos. Admiral West was already on the flight deck, headset pressed tight, eyes fixed on a massive digital map projected onto a portable screen. He turned as the pilot approached. "Glad to see you alive, Commander," West said, voice clipped. "We've got no time to breathe. You're back in the air in 20 minutes. "Sir, with what aircraft?" the pilot asked. West gestured toward a line of gray helicopters being armed by deck crews. "We're setting up a low-altitude recon run along their launch corridor. I need eyes on the ground targets before our strike group goes in." Before the pilot could reply, a thunderous boom rippled across the sea. Both men turned. A massive plume of water rose just off the starboard bow, an anti-ship missile that had missed by meters. The admiral barked into his comms. "All batteries, return fire. Track that launch source." Below the deck, the carrier's phalanx cannons spun up, spitting fire into the air. Metal casings clattered across the deck as another incoming missile was shredded mid-flight. The smell of cordite hung thick. "Sir," an officer called from the operations screen, "satellite confirms coastal batteries active along the Russian enclave. Heavy emplacements, probably bastion launchers." West exhaled sharply. "Then it's time we shut them down." He turned back to the Seahawk pilot. "You'll lead recon. Find those batteries and mark them for strike. The Air Force birds from Lakenheath are on their way." The pilot gave a short nod. "Understood." Minutes later, he was in the cockpit again, this time of a replacement Seahawk, patched together from spare parts and waiting fuel. His new co-pilot was young, tense, and wide-eyed. "Call sign stays Eagle 9, the Admiral's voice said in his headset. "Keep a low profile. You've got F-35s watching your 6. Good hunting." The helicopter lifted, rising into the smoke-streaked air. Below, the Roosevelt loomed like a floating city, her deck bristling with aircraft. The pilot steadied the controls, heading east toward the thin line of coast where the Russian missiles had come from. "Radar's quiet so far," the co-pilot said, scanning his screen. "But they'll see us before we see them." "Let them," the pilot murmured. "We're not sneaking, we're watching." The shoreline appeared ahead, jagged cliffs, fog rolling off the sea, the faint glow of lights hidden behind forested dunes. As the Seahawk descended to 100 feet, its sensors began to pick up movement, heat signatures, heavy machinery, missile platforms rotating. "There," the co-pilot whispered. 3 launchers, maybe 4. Coordinates locked. The pilot toggled the data link. "Command, Eagle 9. We've got visual on the bastions. Transmitting coordinates now. Recommend immediate strike. The Admiral's reply came quick. Coordinates received. Air Force Strike Group inbound. Get clear of that area now. But before the Seahawk could turn, the radar lit up red. Lock warning. They've seen us. The pilot yanked the stick hard. A surface-to-air missile launched from the tree-line, streaking upward. The Seahawk dove low, skimming the water, countermeasures flaring behind them. The missile exploded yards above the surface, the blast wave hammering the tail. Still flying, the pilot growled. We're clear of the kill box. High above, the first wave of American jets screamed in from the west, dozens of F-35s and F-15Es streaking across the dawn. Their bombs hit seconds later, detonations blooming along the coast. The ground below erupted in fire, the enemy launchers obliterated one by one. From the Seahawk's window, the pilot could see it all, the precision, the destruction, the sudden end of the missile threat. Yet even as the last explosion faded, new signals appeared on radar. The co-pilot's voice cracked. "Sir, we've got inbound air from deep inside Russian territory, fast movers. A lot of them." The pilot adjusted his headset, eyes narrowing. "Looks like they're not done yet." And ahead, the rising sun glinted off dozens of contrails streaking toward them, the next wave of the war rushing in across the sky. The sky was alive with movement. Contrails arced and twisted, the horizon splitting open with light as the first Russian jets broke through the clouds, Su-35s, sleek and deadly, fanning out in attack formation. Their afterburners glowed orange against the pale dawn, and the roar of their engines reached the Seahawk like rolling thunder. "Multiple bogies inbound, 20 miles and closing," the co-pilot shouted, hands trembling over the radar console. "Command, this is Eagle 9. We've got heavy air contacts coming straight for the strike group, dozens of them. Request immediate support." "Copy that, Eagle 9. All available CAP fighters are scrambling. Hold your position and mark their vector if possible," came the calm voice of the Admiral over comms. The pilot gritted his teeth. "Hold position," he muttered. "They'll be on top of us in minutes." Through the windshield, he could already see the first glint of sunlight flashing off metal. The Su-35s were diving fast, splitting into wings of 4. They weren't here to scare anyone, they were hunting. Then, like ghosts in the morning haze, streaks of light cut in from the west, F-35s from the carrier's air wing, vectoring in at supersonic speed. The two formations clashed above the coast in a storm of missiles and machine gun bursts. The sky lit up like a thunderstorm. "Air battle in progress," the co-pilot reported. "We're right underneath it." "Then let's move," the pilot snapped. "Heading south. Stay low." The Seahawk banked hard, hugging the waves. Overhead, jet trails twisted and merged, explosions bloomed like fireflowers against the dawn. A Russian fighter spiraled out of the sky, trailing smoke, its wing sheared off by an AIM-9X missile. But for every one that fell, another seemed to appear. "Eagle 9, command called again. "You're too close to the combat zone. Divert immediately." Before the pilot could respond, a burst of static filled his headset, then a strange, unfamiliar voice came through. "Russian. Come. Controlled. American helicopter. We have you in sight. Cut your engines and prepare to land." The pilot froze. The transmission was open, public, meant to rattle them. "Sir," the co-pilot whispered, "they've got us painted." He glanced at his radar display. A single hostile contact was closing fast, low and deliberate. One of the Russian jets had broken formation, hunting them. The pilot flipped switches, voice hard. "Command, we're being targeted by an Su-35. Taking evasive action." "Negative, Eagle 9. Reinforcements inbound. Stall them if you can." Stall them? Against a supersonic fighter? He almost laughed, but there was no time. The roar hit them first, followed by the shadow. The Su-35 swept overhead, inverted, its nose dipping slightly as if to taunt them. For a split second, the pilot could see the Russian insignia gleaming on the fuselage. Then it came around again. "Missile lock!" the co-pilot shouted. "Deploy flares!" The Seahawk banked violently, chaff and flares bursting from its sides. A missile streaked past, detonating in a blinding flash off their tail. The shockwave tossed the helicopter sideways, alarms wailing. "Still flying," the pilot muttered through gritted teeth. "He's coming back." The Russian jet looped around for another pass, this time slower, methodical, lining up the kill shot. But before he could fire, a streak of vapor cut across the sky from the west. An F-35. It dove like a falcon, guns blazing. Tracers ripped through the Su-35's left wing. The Russian pilot tried to roll, but his aircraft burst into flames and spiraled downward, vanishing into the sea in a column of black smoke. Splash one bandit. The F-35 pilot's voice came over comms. "Eagle 9, you're clear." The Seahawk's pilot exhaled, shoulders sagging. "Appreciate the cover. Falcon lead." "Don't thank me yet," the fighter pilot replied. "We've got bigger trouble inbound." Radar just lit up with long-range bombers, Tu-22s, looks like. And they're not flying alone. The Seahawk pilot exchanged a look with his co-pilot. "Bombers? That means—" "Missiles," the co-pilot finished. High above, faint glimmers appeared in the rising sun, dozens of them, moving in perfect formation. The bombers. Behind them, smaller specks fanned out, escorts, covering the strike group. The radio crackled again. Admiral West's voice, harder now, edged with urgency. "All units, this is Admiral West. Be advised, enemy bombers are launching a saturation strike against the fleet. All anti-air systems active. Eagle 9, get out of there now." The pilot stared through the windshield at the distant silhouettes, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew what that many bombers meant. It wasn't a warning shot. It was the next phase. "Command," he said quietly. "If they make it to the fleet, we won't stop them all." There was a pause on the line. Then West answered, voice low. "That's why we won't let them get that far." The horizon erupted. From behind the carrier group, a wall of smoke and fire rose as every ship launched countermissiles in unison. Dozens of contrails raced upward, streaking toward the incoming bombers. The air was alive with sonic booms and the growl of engines. The Seahawk pilot held tight to the controls, eyes locked on the chaos unfolding miles ahead. The first detonations flashed like miniature suns, followed by waves of thunder that rolled through the clouds. And even as the sky burned, something deeper stirred in his gut, a cold realization that this was only the beginning. The Russian bombers were falling, yes, but not all of them. And the few that made it through were already arming for release. The pilot steadied his breath, gripping the controls tighter. "Brace for impact," he said quietly. Because he knew, the next few seconds would decide whether the U.S. fleet lived or vanished beneath the waves. The bombers broke through the wall of smoke like ghosts, massive, silver silhouettes slicing across the upper atmosphere. Each one carried death in its belly, sleek cruise missiles already locking onto the heat signatures of the U.S. carrier group below. The Seahawk's cockpit trembled as the shockwaves rolled through. The pilot's headset crackled with overlapping voices, screams, orders, radar warnings, and the shrill buzz of missile locks. Multiple impacts incoming. 10, no, 15 missiles in the air, the co-pilot shouted, his hands shaking as he adjusted the radar scope. "Get us out of the flight path," the pilot barked. "Heading 210, low altitude. Stay under the radar net." They dropped lower, the ocean only meters beneath them, rotor blades slicing salt spray into mist. The pilot glanced through the side window. Off their port, the USS Roosevelt was bracing for the worst. On her deck, the CIWS cannons spun to life, spitting fire into the air. Hundreds of tracers clawed toward the sky, a desperate storm of defense. A nearby destroyer, the USS Bainbridge, launched a volley of interceptors that screamed upward like silver spears. "Command to all ships," Admiral West's voice boomed through the static, steady even as the chaos built. "Engage full countermeasure protocol. Priority: protect the carrier at all costs." The first missile broke through the defensive net. A white blur, moving at near supersonic speed, too fast for the guns to track. It slammed into the ocean just off the carrier's bow and detonated in a tower of flame. The shockwave rocked the fleet. The Seahawk was thrown sideways, the cockpit flashing red with alarm lights. "Hang on!" the pilot shouted, wrestling the controls. The helicopter spun, then leveled, the ocean a churning wall beneath them. Another explosion, this one closer. A destroyer took a direct hit amidships, fireball blooming across its deck. Black smoke rose in thick plumes as sailors scrambled across the listing hull. "Jesus," the co-pilot whispered. "They're punching through everything." The pilot's jaw tightened. Not for long. He switched frequencies. "Falcon lead, this is Eagle 9. Can you intercept those bombers before they reload?" A calm voice replied through the interference. "Negative, Eagle 9. We're outnumbered. But we've got one card left." Before the pilot could respond, the sky cracked open. From the west, a formation of B-2 Spirits, stealth bombers, emerged from the high-altitude haze, nearly invisible against the dawn. They glided silently, their profiles ghost-like, their presence felt more than seen. The F-35 squadrons peeled away to make room. The B-2s released their payloads, dozens of precision-guided munitions cutting downward through the thin air. "Impact in 5 seconds, Falcon Lead said, voice calm as a surgeon's. The bombs hit. The Russian bombers vanished in a storm of light, shockwaves rolling across the clouds, engines disintegrating mid-flight. Fireballs bloomed in the stratosphere, streaking downward like dying stars. Cheers erupted across the comms channels. "Direct hits! All hostiles neutralized," someone shouted. The pilot exhaled, his grip on the stick finally easing. For a moment, there was silence. The battle noise faded, replaced only by the low hum of engines and the hiss of the sea. But the calm didn't last. "Sir," the co-pilot said softly. "New contact. Subsurface. Bearing 185. The pilot blinked. "Subsurface? Out here." The radar blipped again, faint, deep, and deliberate. "Command, Eagle 9. We've got a sonar ping, possibly a sub. Transmitting coordinates now." Admiral West came on instantly. "Confirmed." Satellite picked it up too. Russian subgroup, Oscar class, possibly more. They're moving into firing range. The pilot felt his blood go cold. The air battle had been a distraction. The real threat was under them the whole time. He looked through the window, waves rolling endlessly below, hiding what lay beneath. "Sir," the co-pilot murmured, "they're positioning right under the fleet." The admiral's voice came again, now edged with something that hadn't been there before. Urgency, maybe fear. "All ships, prepare for anti-submarine operations. Eagle 9, you're closest. Deploy sonar buoys and mark their signatures. We can't let them launch." "Copy that," the pilot said, flipping switches, adrenaline flooding his veins. "Deploying now." The Seahawk banked low over the churning sea, hatches opening. Cylindrical buoys dropped one by one, splashing into the dark water. The sonar feed lit up almost immediately. Faint pings, then clearer shapes forming on the monitor. The co-pilot stared at the screen. "There's not one sub, sir. There's 4. The pilot's heart pounded. 4 Oscar class? That's a strike group. And then another sound. A long, low echo rising through the sonar feed. A launch signal. Sir, the co-pilot said, voice cracking, they've already fired. The admiral's voice burst through the radio, raw and sharp. All ships, brace for impact. Incoming torpedoes, multiple tracks inbound. The Seahawk's pilot looked down through the glass floor panels. Beneath them, faint trails of white bubbles raced through the water, torpedoes rising fast toward the fleet. The co-pilot whispered, "We're out of time." But the pilot's eyes narrowed. "No," he said. "Not yet." He yanked the collective, pulling the Seahawk into a climb, the ocean dropping away beneath them. Because somewhere out there, hidden among the waves, the U.S. Navy's own subs were waiting. Silent. Watching. And as the Russian torpedoes cut their deadly paths toward the surface, a calm voice from deep below whispered through the comms. "This is USS California. Targets acquired. Firing countermeasures." Then the sea erupted again, columns of water bursting skyward as torpedoes met torpedoes, detonating in a violent, churning storm that turned the entire horizon into a battlefield beneath the waves. The Seahawk pilot gripped the controls tighter, eyes scanning the ocean below. "Admiral," he said over the comm, voice steady, "it's not over yet. They're still out there." And from somewhere in the deep, a new sonar ping echoed back, slow, deliberate, and closer than before. Too close. The sonar ping grew louder, sharper, a hollow metallic heartbeat rising from the depths. Every person aboard the Seahawk felt it in their bones. The pilot's knuckles whitened around the controls as the sound pulsed again. "Sir," the co-pilot said quietly, eyes fixed on the sonar display. "It's right beneath us." The admiral's voice came over the comms, calm but edged with steel. "Eagle 9, hold position. Our subs are closing in." The pilot swallowed hard. "If they're this close, sir, they're lining up for a shot." "Then we'll make sure it's their last," West replied. Below, the black surface of the sea rippled, not from wind, but from something immense moving beneath it. Then came the unmistakable shimmer of breaking water. The Russian submarine, a massive Oscar class, surfaced like a rising monster, its dark hull slick with foam and salt. Its missile bay doors began to open, one by one, like iron gills. "God," the co-pilot breathed. "They're going to fire from the surface." Before the pilot could respond, a voice crackled through the radio, deep and unfamiliar, speaking in Russian-accented English. "This is Captain Sergei Myrov of the Voronezh. You are outmatched. Leave now, and you may live." The pilot's jaw clenched. "Not today." At that same moment, the ocean behind the sub exploded upward, a white spear of water and steel breaking through the waves. A U.S. Virginia-class submarine, the USS California, had breached in perfect firing position. Its torpedo tubes were already open. The Russian captain must have seen it too. His voice came again, panicked this time. "Fire! Fire!" But it was too late. From the California's hull, 2 torpedoes launched in quick succession, streaking through the dark sea. The first slammed into the Voronezh's starboard side, tearing through metal and silence alike. The second struck its missile bay, detonating the payload before it could launch. The explosion was blinding, a pillar of flame and water hundreds of feet high, the shockwave rippling outward in concentric rings. The Seahawk was thrown back by the blast, the cockpit flashing white before leveling out. When the spray cleared, the Russian submarine was gone, only oil and debris rising to the surface, burning faintly in the morning light. "Direct hit," came the voice from California. "Target neutralized. Area secure." A stunned silence filled the comms. Then Admiral West's voice came through, steady and proud. "Outstanding work, California. Fleet, stand down from red alert. All units, begin recovery operations." This engagement is over. The Seahawk pilot finally allowed himself to exhale. The ocean below, moments ago a cauldron of chaos, was returning to stillness, waves rolling gently under the brightening sky. "Sir," the co-pilot murmured, "we actually made it." The pilot nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the distant horizon where smoke met sunrise. "Yeah," he said quietly. "But it cost us." They circled once more, passing over the damaged destroyer now being tended by rescue ships. Smoke trailed upward like a memory. "Command," the pilot said softly into his mic. "Eagle 9 returning to carrier." "Copy that, Eagle 9. You did your part. Come home." As the Seahawk banked toward the Roosevelt, the radio fell silent. The sky, still scarred with contrails, shimmered gold as the sun broke fully over the water. The pilot watched it rise, the light washing across the waves, cutting through the haze of battle. He didn't feel triumph, only the weight of what nearly happened, and what surely would again. Because deep beneath the calm sea and bright sky, other engines still stirred. Other captains still waited. The war hadn't ended that morning. It had only been paused. And somewhere in his gut, the pilot knew, the next time Russia challenged the United States, no one would be pulling their punches.